and caring and loving for people goes a long ways. It can't stop there though, but I think just the spirit of service, work ethic, responsibility, um, some drivenness, that you're not going to let up, not going to give up. And you believe in your calls so much. And if it's right, you got to know it's right and make sure the agenda is not your agenda, it's God's agenda, and it's pure, it's not for your self glorification. If that's there, then you can be, I think, a little more driven, to say we're going to get there somehow, some way.
From the IT Company, it's Made Right Here, the stories of East Tennessee founders, creators, and builders. From the idea behind it to the impact it had on the community, their employees, and their personal lives, we're taking you behind the scenes of the movements they built. Hey, it's Paul again from the IT Company. One of the things I really love about Steve Diggs is he's really understated. So when you meet him and you hear him, he's kind of aw shucks. I love it. And he is such a powerhouse, but so humble and so real. And so on today's episode 2, you're just going to hear a lot about how Emerald Youth started spinning up and the flywheel started turning, how they really began to build this organization into what it is today, how Steve's mindset of never settling and always pushing himself to do better has really moved Emerald Youth forward and moved him forward, about community, about his family. There's just so much richness in here. So I think you're going to love I think you're just going to love hearing this episode and really starting to hear a little bit more about Emerald Youth and the impact it's making in our community, and how Steve has led that in humility and in love. So listen in.
The neighborhood we started in, though, it was more of that low to moderate income, working poor. But the one thing, people just barely making ends meet. I mean, the tension sometimes in the home be really tough, especially for the children, young people, and there comes just a real spirit sometimes of despair, hopelessness, and we saw that in time. We encountered a lot of young people, teenage moms, that were, that was just really quick. I had a lot being thrown in my face I wasn't ready for. And honestly, when we started,
you're like 20.
Yeah, I was 20. It started when I was 22. Yeah, so I was really not much different in age than a lot of people we were working with. But, just fortunate with the people that was around us, and some of the folks just poured their life in as volunteers, to make it work. We didn't have any vehicles. We didn't have any van. We didn't have one church van. We didn't have a bus or a van. I mean, the church wasn't just rich with all types of resources. But
so you're building this thing at the church, and you're getting kids to come. And I mean, you said the church was like 100 people.
Well, I mean, maybe 110 on average Sunday, and 120 a good Sunday. That was it. And
now you've got this burgeoning youth thing happening at a young age in your early 20s. At what point does it become like, hey, this is not, like, we can't do this. Like, we got to go do this something else.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
I moved to full time and was starting to raise some money outside for me to be full time.
Yeah.
I mean,
with 100 members, they couldn't afford to probably pay you full time.
No, they couldn't, and so people were being generous with us then. A couple churches were kicking in to help make it happen because they were seeing these. I mean, really, we were just, a year and a half in it. We were over 100 more kids were coming with no resources, and it was tough. I mean, we didn't have enough people. The young people had this real hunger for it, to just be in fellowship, that love, to find the hope, to be encouraged. But some of them were very tough.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember a young man that found a little sawed-off shotgun that he brought and put under the bushes, and I had to call the police, and then I was down at court begging the judge to let him off, you know.
Wow.
You know, they weren't all. I don't want to send them in. They're all carrying guns, but they were hard living. I'd call it, a lot of them, and at first too, I didn't really appeal to the athletes. Even in me and my leadership, I was getting all these like rock band guys, you know, coming. I didn't know what to do with them, but they were a blast. And so, yeah, the resources weren't there. But this, in 1991, Pastor and I, Bob Bean, founding pastor of Emerald Youth, we go to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and there was a Methodist church there in that city that had started an outreach and 501c3. And that was the first time I was introduced to a 501c3 and the concept. And they also, not only had they created an organization structure to broaden ownership, we also realized when we got in this, we were playing, you know, faith and playing ball and just trying to fellowship and expose young people to new things in life. But we were seeing, you know, the fact that their education was so poor. We had some of our high schoolers at that time dropping out. Our local high school at Fulton, before Mr. Speeds got there, it was a very dismal graduation or rate. I mean, we were losing a lot of young people in that community, and there was just some other troubles, you know, we were seeing. And I realized, and you know, we all did, is this had to be a whole child work. It was, and we had to get them younger.
Yeah.
We had to go younger, stay with them all the way through, and we had to really be appealing to their faith, their mental, their social, their education, their physical. It was all that. And the group in Minneapolis, way down the street, you know, on all of this, they had the organization structure, they had the whole child youth development work in place. They were already doing it. And even then, they were probably progressive for where the youth development industry was at the time. I mean, 3 decades later, the youth development industry has matured greatly. So, and it's become more than people are understanding more. It can't just be an after school feel good experience. This is developmental. We're trying to now take children and get them prepared to be contributing citizens to society. If you don't get that done well in your city will not reach its potential. People get that now, and it's also important for the well-being of just the individual. So it's twofold. You do this work for the individual, you do the work for the community at large. And so we learned a lot, but we brought that model back and began what's now Emerald Youth Foundation.
So you were there, and you both were like,
it was obvious.
That's how we got to do it.
It was just too obvious in what we had to do. And we went like May of that year, and in October of 1991, we organized what's now Emerald Youth Foundation. My wife and I also, we subscribed that same year to an organization called Christian Community Development Association. Dr. John Perkins, Wayne Gordon, and their message was, you know, you move into the neighborhood that you're serving. So we relocated and bought a house that same year in the Oakwood neighborhood in 1991. We still live in that neighborhood. We're in the second house, but just moved down about 150 yards. And my daughter and son went through inner city schools and graduated Fulton High School. But it was all about trying to get integrated into the life of the community. But first years, especially, and really up until last year's, when we could get a little bit more capacity, there was just a really significant need to learn, understand, and do well with the youth development. I mean, Knoxville it's very, very generous. But when you get into some of those larger community development initiatives, you get into the need for financial resources that become a little bit tougher in a city our size. It's critical to stay engaged with the community and especially trying to find and retain leadership who are indigenous still to the city neighborhoods and get behind them. And so, it's hard. It's a great community, a great place to be. I wouldn't want to be in any other city trying to do this work because of the generosity toward children and the understanding of the need of this. But it's also can be a tough environment as well to pull off the kind of impact you need to have.
Now, how do you see now, looking back? We talked about this earlier, but you know that one moment, obviously, of that young man passing away. But how do you think these things we've talked about how do you think they show up in Steve Diggs today? Like the way you're raised and the influences of your parents and coaches and stuff, and the way you lead and the way do you see something there in all that?
Yeah, I think there's some of that. I'd love to just be able to, really paint a clear image of that, know what the clear thread is, and maybe you'll figure that out for me here today. If this turns into counseling service here, but I gotta think there's back a little bit of passion and love has to be at the heart.
Yeah.
If you don't have that, it's sort of, as Corinthians said, it's like nothing. It's a bunch of noise.
Yeah.
And caring and loving for people goes a long ways. Can't stop there though, but I think just the spirit of service, work ethic, responsibility, some drivenness, that you're not going to let up, not going to give up.
Yeah.
And you believe in your calls so much, and if it's right, you got to know it's right and make sure the agenda is not your agenda, it's God's agenda, and it's pure, it's not for your self-glorification. If that's there, then you can be, I think, a little more driven, to say we're going to get there somehow, some way. And we got a lot of that tenacity, I think, in our organization of it's whatever it takes. And we got people as part of our team, both paid and the volunteers and the marketplace leaders. It's just that level of commitment and loyalty.
Yeah.
So I think it's in all those kind of attitudes and thoughts. I don't know how much of it's the skills I learned then. I think I'm still learning the skills I need.
Yeah.
But the more community. I learned a lot about community growing up. It's this community in the church, a community where I lived, or my teams I played on. Even in college, I was in a small campus. It was community. Community is critical. Getting a healthy community of people that are together toward a mission and benefiting from each other. That's probably something I've been able to take forward. And I recognize the importance that you can't bulldoze over a community, a people or a place, a community, a place.
What do you? I'm curious about. You've been on this journey for 30 years, more than 30 years actually. It was before that. Who are the people, or is there any one person or multiple people who in that journey specifically have been like, man, I couldn't have done it. Like they have. I would imagine your wife.
She's been supportive. Now, don't get an image like this quiet woman who just supported her man. I'm not saying that at all. But she's been reasonable with me and what kind of schedule at times it's taken, and not always how many hours, but the times the hours have to be deployed. I tell people it takes me longer to get things done, so I have to work a lot longer than other people. I just can't help it. It takes me extra time. So she's been supportive of that and never questioned. She challenged me, and unfortunately she has. I've been in real trouble, but in her first year of when she was out of college, we had I think in 1 year we had 12 camps, youth camps. And she went on all 12 with me then.
Wow.
I don't even go on youth camps anymore. And I promise you, she quit a long time ago. I burned her out very fast. But yeah, she's critical. My whole family, my son and daughter, they were part of this growing up too. So it's like they were in it, but they were a part of it. The founding pastor of Emerald Avenue Church, the great thing there was at the time, and they hired me, and the church said, go do the outreach, but they didn't know what they were getting into either. And so these children and young people started coming in the church, and it was like, whoa, wait just a second. We didn't know it was going to act like this. It wasn't, they're surprised what it looked, but how it was going to be and start changing things. And the pastor basically let me keep doing my job, and from the pulpit, he kept preaching the message on why, the why. Why do we have to do this, no matter what? even if it means it changes who we are and
Huh.
how we do things, we have to keep this work going out in the community. And he just really sold out to it, and was just so good to families that needed a pastor that weren't a part of the church. So I tell, folks, if they come to me today and say, they're wanting in a church and want to start outreach, it would be like, if the pastor's not going to stand behind this from the pulpit to let you go, then you don't need to do it. I mean, you got to have
That's
that
good.
coverage. And I was 22 years old. I had to have someone
Yeah.
giving me coverage. And
How much older was he than you, or is he than you?
he was in his 50s then.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
saying he's
Yeah.
still alive today. He's
Yeah,
he's
that's cool.
in his 90s, and he's retired as pastor, but still runs the food pantry at the church. And during COVID, when everything was shut down, he was at that food pantry during the week as a 90-year-old, giving out food right in the
Wow.
heart of when things were shelter in place. So, I mean,
Wow.
he's a servant-hearted guy.
Wow.
Influenced me a lot, about just walking with people and really engaging in their life at a point of where transformation can happen.
Yeah.
Our founding board chair that came out of that church too was a man named John Reese, and at the time he was in his late 70s, early 80s. He was our board chair, and I was in my 20s, and he was retired producer with WATE, was in philanthropy across town, and he would drive me around and go in to meet with his friends and people in offices to tell them about what we were trying to do in the community. But he would just sort of John Reese's name and drive me around to help introduce me to folks. And I still don't know what I'm doing, but I really did that. So he put his credibility out there on the word. But then from there, Paul, people just like you, including you, you've engaged with us. I'm fortunate. The marketplace, I call it, people that have come in to share their expertise and their leadership with the work. I see that my role is I'm the convener of that. I'm a facilitator of it. I don't have to know it all. I've got to be able to convene and get people to the table to help bring their leadership to help us do the work. And I've been influenced through that all the way through. I have learned by just being able to listen and be associated with people out in the community. And it's not just in business marketplaces, people in the neighborhoods. You learn from the people and the families who we're serving. But I'm fortunate, and I would tell folks, and I do tell folks, the position I'm in where during a day, while I'm not running the programs every day, most every day I have some interaction with somebody in an inner city community that's a part of our work.
Right.
And I have relationships. I'm still working with Fulton High's football team. I'll be on the sideline Friday night, be in the locker room with them, part of that. But here I am today with you. Yesterday I'm at lunch with Mr. Sansom, who owns HT Hackney and multiple companies across the country. And I get to bring those worlds together.
That's cool.
And that's a sweet spot for me.
That's cool.
And I'm not necessarily good or fit in any of the worlds well, but I get to see the worlds come together. And because there's the people like you and the Mr. Sansons and others that they care deeply about the well-being of children, and to bring that resource to their need is pretty special.
That's cool.
So I'm fortunate. I mean, I could start naming you names all day long, and it's hard to pinpoint just one for me.
Yeah. Well, a couple of questions about the work you're doing. It's kind of two parts. One I think might seem obvious, but I'm curious your response to it. The first one though is, what impact do you think the work you're doing and the business that you guys have built, the ministry, how does it impact the people that work for you? Do you think? What do you think? The businesses, the culture, everything we build, it impacts them. How do you think it's impacting your team?
I think the majority of the people that would work for us, especially if they do it for any time, any length of time of years, then they have a calling to it. It is something that they just can't not do at a season of life. It may not be lifelong, but they got a calling to it, and I think we've been able to give people a vehicle, a platform to try to live out that calling. You know, in my tenure of this, you know, I was working with young people, but having to raise money or having to try to do some of the other business side of the work while I'm still trying to serve the young people to grow that. We have an infrastructure now where people who can come in, if they really just want to teach children, they get to teach children. Or if they want to coach and do sports, they get to do sports. They don't have to take on all. They have some administrative responsibility, but we just create that platform. So I think it's just become a place for many to be in a community that's like any community. It's not perfect, but we do have a decent commitment, I think, to our values to want to be what an authentic community should be, and so that you can live out your calling for your Lord and in different ways.
That's cool.
And if you're a volunteer for us, I really think it can go for some of our employees, for volunteers, and even for donors, people who give generously in this town. I think we're all, you know, have this calling upon our life to care for the least of these in our community. You know, we have it, whether or not we respond or not, we all are expected to do that. And I'd like to think of Emerald Youth as being a place, a vehicle for people to live out that expectation to care well for children, for young people, or others who have need, to give them really an opportunity, you know, whether it's your giving or your service or your other talents that you might offer to the work. We want to be that vehicle, a healthy vehicle people can trust, has credibility, and know it does really have an impact.
One thing which dovetails into my question that you and I talked about at the beginning, there's still a lot of people that don't know what Emerald Youth is.
Yeah.
You know, and so my question is, what do you think? I know what you want. Maybe want the impact to be to the Knoxville community.
Yeah.
But start that out with, what does Emerald Youth do?
Okay.
For the folks that don't know that, you know, and like, what is the goal? What are you trying to accomplish at the macro level?
Yeah, our target is to serve well in inner city Knoxville, core neighborhoods in the heart of the city of Knoxville. And inside of those city neighborhoods, from there, we're trying to specifically help move children at a young age through a developmental process that gets them ready to be contributors to our community. So the heart of it, we want them growing in their faith and learning and developing a missional life and to serve. Second is we got them academically ready for the next stage of their education. And third, that they're taking care of themselves and they're physically active and living well. So ultimately they become what we call promising godly leaders for Knoxville. That they're living exemplary life behaviors of faith, learning, and health, and become community leaders and also productive in the workforce. That pipeline, if you will, we're trying to get that created. So that happens through some youth, church youth and after school ministries. Youth sports is real significant for us. We have an older youth to young adult transition initiative where we have, hopefully next year we'll have up to 5 high school learning centers where we're preparing them for their future career in college and then walking with them post high school. And then we have a health center in partnership with Cherokee Health and UT Medical Center in the Lonsdale area that we're trying to scale now. And then we have a sister organization we launched called Emerald Charter Schools. It's operating Knox County's only public charter school, K-8 public school here in our community. So through the year, 3,000 young people served in a whole child developmental program.
And real quick on the charter school, just what is a charter school as opposed to just a regular? Because it is a partnership between public, private.
The LEA is still, we're We have to be accountable to our LEA, which is Knox County Schools, and the state of Tennessee. Same curriculum standards and testing standards, but it is a public school that's independently operated. So we have a separate board of directors, and there's a little more autonomy for us to run the school differently than the whole system across the county. So we have a longer school day, a longer school year than the traditional public school.
Right?
We do.
Yeah.
We do have uniforms that we wear, and there's 450 scholars in the school, K through 8 right now. And it's free, public school.
You apply.
Anyone in Knox County can apply. We only market to the inner city neighborhoods, but anyone in Knox County can go into the lottery. And we don't get to choose who goes into the school, so we may have children with special needs or education needs, and it may be all from inner city or some outside, but that's, we have to have attorneys and other folks there to ensure that lottery is really pure, and it is. We can't move anybody up on the, on the wait list that the lottery doesn't move up, so.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so impact. What when you look at it, you kind of defined it in that way, but the essence of it for you, you're doing this. You've been on this journey for a reason. Like when you, let's say you live to be 95, and it's at the end, and I'm sitting with you and it says, Steve, did you accomplish what you did it do what you like? What would that be when you look back and say,
You know how you probably come to some of our events at Emerald Youth, and you'll see us put on stage one or two young adults that talk about they went through the program, and now today, here's what I'm doing in the community. Here's what I'm doing in the workplace. The vision for me, and when I look back, is we build to be an ideal. We say, here's 200, here's 300 every year coming out of the neighborhoods with that testimony.
That's awesome.
So you're looking more at cohorts of young people, the whole, significant size of a class from a different cohort every year, not just a few testimonials, but that's when we know that we have arrived, and that's when we know that our city truly is making sure that every child has opportunity for a full life, and we can point to their trajectory at the end of that in their young adult years. We see sizable numbers of young people who are now at a place where they can be contributors to society.
So good.
Yeah. That track?
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, absolutely. That totally makes sense. I've asked people that question different ways. It's like, close your eyes, what do you see? And I think that's a really pretty beautiful picture. Yeah. Of like, I see hundreds.
Yeah, and kids. So I see their event. We'll put one day on that stage, this is the class of 2025, and look at here's 200 of them up here, and that one's over working here. This one's awesome. In coaching youth sports over here. This one's the pastor of the church. This one's the head of the PTA at your school. That's when we get a real healthy city, and it's that pipeline. You got to have you got to deal with the homeless. You got to have economic development. I mean, we know all the things, but if you don't get this next generation of young people on the trajectory to be contributors, we'll never get to what our city could really be, what we aspire to. But that is no question the impact. But also we talk some around with our staff when we're together. Is if we had a tombstone for our organization. Here's the founding year, 1991, and we ended 50 years later. Make sure they put on our tombstone, they love children well. They love the Lord, but they love children well.
That's really good.
If you remember that about us, I hope there's some impact, but we want to make sure that's happening, because out of that love's going to be hope, and out of that love's going to be really a challenge to young people to be on a path that's really meaningful to them as well as others in the community.
That's good. So 2 wrap-up questions. One is, you're 30-something years in. How do you think this has changed you?
Yeah. And it definitely keeps driving me to try to work on my ego, of where life's not all about me. And you know, I'm in the middle of it where it's in my face all the time to be
Yeah.
reminded, and I still have to keep working on it, right? So you just, sort of like if you coach youth sports, I say everyone ought to coach youth sports. Because whether you come out of it where people can see it or not, inside you know how you really are.
Yeah.
Sometimes you know
Yeah.
what's going on inside of you when you're really angry and want to.
You ever seen Kicking and Screaming with Will Ferrell?
Yeah,
Or he
yeah.
throws the chairs.
Yeah,
He's the coach
yeah.
of the soccer team.
Yeah.
You feel that way
You,
sometimes.
you can feel that way inside. It is some of it's human, but I
Yeah.
mean, you realize what character in your
Yeah.
life still needs to be worked on.
Yeah.
So I guess my point in all that is I think I continue to learn that I have, like Paul, I've never arrived. Don't ever think I have. I've got more to learn. I've got more to get in check and more to grow and develop. But it's been a blessing. I mean, I said earlier to you, Paul, that the seat I get to sit in to see the best of all sides. I get
Yeah.
to see the best of some of our toughest kids even. And I get to see the best of some of the toughest people in the workforce and in the community at large or in political seats, you know, and that's a real joy when you can see it, you know, come together for the good in our community. And I love that, and it keeps me inspired, and I think that's a lot it, you know. The impact too, for me, you know, it's been more positive. I'm more blessed than anything. I don't really have a reason to complain, but yet I do, you know. But I've, you know, it's been a struggle for me to have the balance. I mean, running any organization's hard. You know, starting a nonprofit in a smaller town.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'd be that way for someone starting a for-profit business. It's hard.
It's tough.
It's a heavy lift, and it's rare you get all the resources you need, and it takes years to build the infrastructure.
Yeah.
I mean, people look at Emerald Youth right now, and I mean, they can drive where our buses park, and I don't know, we have about 35 vehicles. You know, we've got properties around town, but none of that happened in the first 15 to 20 years, rarely. I mean, it was small.
Yeah.
You know,
We're 30 years down the road.
yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and we really just now are getting to the real infrastructure of where people can come and do the work long term and have a healthy lifestyle and do a lot of ministry, a lot of work, but it be manageable. And I went through a lot of my life where it wasn't manageable. A lot of that's my own fault because I really didn't know what I was doing. I was still learning, and I didn't have a blueprint. But I would say, you know, the balance and just trying to manage it all, you know, is taking an effect on me that I'm trying to recover from. But it's still a joy. You know?
What's the organizational size people wise right now? Full-time employees.
Yeah, Emerald Youth. We have actually two organizations.
Right.
I'm president, CEO of one, Emerald Youth Foundation, and is our faith-based organization, and the public charter school organization. Emerald Youth right now has 90 full-time employees. With all of our part-time intern, I think it's about 140.
Wow.
And then the charter school organization, we have 70, I believe, right now.
It's a big organization.
You know, several $1 million, you know, operating budget for both.
Yeah.
But we started out with about $5,000 and part-time. Our first year of Emerald Youth Foundation, 1991, that was a $50,000 budget, and that included me being a full-time salary. So that tells you I didn't have any money, but I had all I needed, though.
Yeah.
You know.
Steve Jobs has a saying where he says, "I'm always amazed at how many overnight successes took 20 years to build." You know, it's like, and it's just there's no overnight success, right? It's just you wake up and anybody walks in there Emerald Youth today and sees it like, wow, buildings and fields and organization and structure, and you know, it's like you said, it's just been in the past whatever 5 years.
Blood and tears,
come
people
together.
don't see. I would tell if you get into this kind of work and you're trying to, you know, urban community or anything like nonprofit where it's going to be about transforming people, transforming situations. If you're not getting into it thinking a 15-year plus run, I don't know why. Don't start it.
Don't do it.
I mean, because it's gonna. I can't imagine unless you just so talented. even in this town too, is that anytime we start with, you see, or something gets started, it has all the resources, it seems right up front. It's rare you've seen it
Be
last.
success, yeah, very, very right.
The
I mean,
blocking and
I can think of
tackling.
many of them right now that have already failed.
Well, you don't have time to learn, get your
Yeah.
culture, get your DNA.
You need to go through the tough times. to
Yeah,
get
I
to
don't
it.
want to go back to it.
Yeah.
I will never start another one, Paul. Please, Lord, don't make me to do that. But I wouldn't want to give up what we
Yeah,
did in
right,
those
yeah.
developmental years, the relationships,
Yeah.
what we've learned, and I think now at a place we can really help propel people
Yeah,
forward
that's
and that want to do the work. And you know, I want them to still have a little pain, right? We all
Yeah.
gotta have a little
Yeah,
pain,
yeah, it's good
but
for us. Yeah,
but let them go and
Yeah.
get a lot done.
it's good. I have one more question, but I want to look at something. I always get paranoid that like, is this thing recording? Like, what would happen if we didn't record all this? Okay, that's good.
Praise God! I love
Can
you,
you
man.
imagine?
I'm sure you wished I could do it again and get better.
I've
for
done.
you.
I've done. One. I did one and it failed.
Did you?
I did one on Zoom, and Zoom didn't record it.
Really?
And I was like, I haven't told the guy yet. I'm like, I don't have the heart to call him.
If I knew you had any questions about it, I would have asked you 45 minutes ago. Go check that.
Well, Macy's usually here checking them to make sure.
I've been
they're
nervous for an
recorded.
hour and a half. Oh man, I can't do it again.
Well, my last
That's
question.
fine.
My last question I ask everybody is, you know, through the process, through the journey, you said some of it. You've had a lot of, you made mistakes, you've had failures, and you've had successes. You know, looking back now, do you feel like you've learned more, grown more through the mistakes and the failures, or through the successes? What's taught you the most?
I can't imagine there's probably hardly anyone you talk to doesn't say, "Hey, it's the failures and the mistakes." Maybe. One of the problems with being driven is you don't really even celebrate the successes very long, right? It's terrible. And I'm trying to do better because it's not fair to the people around
That's
you, no
right,
question.
Yeah.
But your mind's on to what could we have done better. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter how successful it was. You always want to get better. It's a great trait, but it's problematic, you know. But I'd have to say for me, it's not just all failure, but things that didn't go like you thought, or the
Yeah.
process. You know, a lot of times it's in the process. Could have been better for more people
Yeah.
and even yourself. You know, how do you replicate or do something like this again so the process isn't so cumbersome
Yeah.
that it's more inclusive, if you will, even with people at times. And
Yeah.
so I think it's in that for me. More, it's not so much how the outcome went; it's more of how the process went.
Yeah. That's good.
Well, that was awesome. I loved having Steve on the podcast, and I love spending time with him and hearing his story. I love unpacking everybody's stories. It's one of my favorite things. So I would say if you're listening and you know of somebody that you think would be a great fit, somebody who has built or created an organization that is a little bit more mature, it's been around for, say, better than 3 to 5 years and is starting to really build and really more 5 to 10 years. If you know somebody, please have them drop me an email, a message on LinkedIn or on our Made Right Here LinkedIn. So thanks again for listening. Thanks again for hearing Steve's episode. I would encourage you also to go support Emerald Youth Foundation. It is doing big, exciting, powerful, important work in our community. Thanks.